welcome back to the English Talk. Now, for our next segment, we have a very special guest who flew all the way from Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big round of applause for Gianluca Michelli.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. This set's beautiful.
Thanks, my mom helped me, made it. Alright, so anyways, in the 12 months that you traveled across the world and reading all the different poems that there were out there, tell me, which one did you find to be the best poem that there was, and how did you end up finding this?
See, so I spent the last 12 months traveling around, and I really wanted to find a poem that's able to get back to the viewers for this particular channel. So I actually met a great guy. His name's Billy Collins, and I found him in New York, and I actually got my hands on the masterpiece, the history teacher.
Alright, so you mentioned Billy Collins when you were on your trip. Anything you found out interesting about him?
Yeah, so once I flew out to New York, I knew automatically I wanted to meet up with him, and I actually got into contact and went out for dinner. I found out throughout this dinner, he was born March 22nd, 1941, and he actually started writing poetry at a very young age. He had created and developed his first piece of poetry at the age of 12, and since then he was able to develop this unique style that's able to attract a lot of audiences. For example, his use of plain language and dry humor was able to actually be very unique in the style of poetry as seen in the history teacher, and was able to attract a lot of other people.
Right.
Growing up, he had attended university, had graduated, and then automatically became a professor. But then throughout him being a professor, he had actually started writing poems for the Rolling Stones magazines. And this opened up a lot of doors of opportunity for him. So he was able to create poems, get it for the Rolling Stones, and it actually had got him to essentially where he is today. Today he's currently, I believe, 71 years old, and he's actually giving back to high school students, talking to them about poetry alongside still being a teacher at a fellow university.
Wow, it seems like you guys had a really awesome time at dinner. Let's hope you paid though, eh? So now, let's get into the actual poem itself. What did you really find interesting about the poem?
Yeah, so the poem, The History Teacher by obviously Billy Collins, I found it very, very unique. Starting off, in most general terms, it's about a teacher. A history teacher, and it's a young group of students. He essentially wants to protect the students' innocence by not telling them the reality of these historical events. For example, the history teacher says the Ice Age was just an age where a lot of people wore several layers and sweaters. As you can see, he's really hiding against what the reality of this historical event was in order to protect them. But what he doesn't realize is this actually backfires. You see, when he keeps telling them about the run-down or the watered-down versions of these historical events, it turned them into monsters. They would go out to recess and torment the weak and the smart, while the history teacher was oblivious and was actually planning for the next lesson. So me reading this the first time, I found it very unique, and I knew automatically that I had to dig deeper into understanding what the true message was.
Right. Alright, so when you talked about the poem, you mentioned a lot of historical events. One of them was the Ice Age, and do you think you really had an upbringing on the piece of text that you had read?
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So I noticed a lot throughout this poem, such as the Stone Age, Ice Age, Spanish Inquisition. There was a lot of historical events. But this poem was actually made in 1993. So what I did was I quickly researched a couple of events that happened in 1993, such as the introduction of NAFTA, Nelson Mandela becoming president, alongside the introduction as the hugest website, Amazon, being introduced in 1994. The point I'm trying to make was, even though there's a lot of historical events in here, they all took place a very, very long time ago. The Stone Age, the War of the Roses, these were all things that took place before Billy Collins was simply alive. So I felt as if these historical events, or the historical events in 1994, they really didn't play an impact on the way that he constructed this poem, or it didn't have an influence on his writing. I felt as if he just wanted to focus on basic, big historical events that a lot of people were able to relate to, but really didn't have a massive effect on his life, nor the creation of this poem.
While reading this text, did you find anything interesting, such as literary criticism, or any lenses that you found in this text, or any in-text features that you found interesting?
Yeah, so one that I wanted to talk about quickly was the tone. The tone I had really gotten in depth. The use of angry tone, abusive tone, and especially malevolent tone. It was very obviously seen throughout the poem. But another one I really wanted to explore was the archetypal lens. So the archetypal lens was basically understanding the main message that everyone was able to take out of this poem. And alongside, it shows universal symbols within the poem that can be recognized from culture to culture. So the main message that I felt everyone that is able to see is simply that the teacher is trying to protect the student's innocence. But diving into the universal symbols that everyone's able to realize, I felt as if the teacher and the student were a big one. For example, the teacher was able to signify a symbol such as intelligence and a use of hierarchy, while the students showed signs of the victim being very easy to manipulate. So I felt as if these were universal symbols that were shown from, and that can be shown from culture to culture when reading this poem.
Okay, so for the moment that everyone in this audience, including myself, has been waiting for.
Yeah, I can tell.
Yeah, we've been waiting a long time. What do you feel as if the purpose of this poem really was?
So, the obvious purpose that I feel like as if everyone would be able to see is that the teacher's trying to simply protect the student's innocence. But I felt as if this is really not the purpose, and there's much more of a deeper meaning. Right. So I felt as if the purpose that I felt as if represents the poem can be summed up by the quote by the famous Sir Winston Churchill. And the quote is that those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. So what this particular means is those who don't simply learn and grow from these historical events, they're simply bound to repeat and happen again. This is what this history teacher is doing. By the history teacher giving them watered down versions and not giving them reality, they're not being able to actually learn from these historical events and being able to grow with them. By them going outside and tormenting the weak and the smart, these are signs and symbols of historical events regaining and happening again because they simply don't have the knowledge and information of what the historical event actually was. I felt as if this plays a huge impact on it, and it is a much deeper meaning. And in order for the students to be successful in life, they must be able to face reality. They must be able to grow in order to not affect the future. Right. Personally, between you and me, when I do bad, let's say on a test or a game in such soccer, I always learn from my experiences in order for that experience not to happen again. But these students are not given the opportunity from that, and this teacher is turning them into monsters. So in a whole, what I feel as if the purpose of this poem is they are simply not being able to learn from these historical events, and they're doomed for history to repeat themselves.
All right, well, my producer's telling me to cut it out, so that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you for tuning in to English Talk, and thank you, Mr. Michelli, for being here.
It's been a pleasure.